Welcome to Sleepy Stories. In this episode, we will take a clear and steady look at the invisible forces that are working all around you, even now, as you rest. The goal is to help you learn a few calm, interesting things about the world while your body unwinds and prepares for sleep. If you notice that you do not fall asleep immediately, that is completely fine. You can still let your thoughts move slowly through these explanations, like a quiet walk through a familiar landscape, and allow your muscles to soften without any pressure to drift off. Before we continue, if you enjoy listening to these gentle scientific journeys, you are welcome to like this episode and subscribe, so you can return whenever you want an evening of calm learning. Simply listen, let your breathing slow, and allow the information to settle at its own pace. Some of the most important parts of reality are things you cannot see directly. You cannot see the pull that keeps your body on the bed, or the pressure of the air resting on your skin. You cannot see the electric fields that guide charges through the wires in your walls, or the magnetic field that quietly points a compass needle toward the north. Yet, you live inside these invisible structures every moment of your life. They shape the path of a falling object, the sound of your voice in the air, the light that reaches your eyes, and even the signals that travel silently through your room. Right now, while you are lying or sitting somewhere safe, you are surrounded by these forces. Gravity is holding you gently against the surface beneath you. Air is filling your lungs and pressing softly in all directions. Friction between fabrics keeps your pillow from sliding away. Light, perhaps dim, is crossing the space between a lamp and your eyes in straight lines that you do not see, only the result. Nothing about this is dramatic or urgent. It is simply the way the world quietly works, the background machinery that you usually do not notice because it is always there. Invisible does not mean imaginary. When scientists speak about forces and fields, they are talking about patterns that have been measured, tested, and used to make predictions that match reality. Engineers design buildings, bridges, aircraft, and medical devices with these same ideas, and those structures stand, fly, and function in reliable ways. The fact that you can trust an elevator, a staircase, or a simple chair is a sign that the invisible rules of physics are real and dependable. In this story, we will follow these invisible forces one by one. We will start close to your own body with the feeling of weight and the support of the mattress or chair beneath you. From there, we will move outward to the air that surrounds you, the weather outside your walls, and the tides moving in distant oceans. We will look at electricity and magnetism, the waves that carry music and messages through space, and the bonds that hold the atoms in your room together. Slowly, step by step, you will see that what feels invisible is often clear once you know where to look. As you listen, you do not need to remember every detail. This is not a test. The purpose is to give your mind something orderly to rest on, so that worries and stray thoughts have less room to take over. If at some point your eyes grow heavier and the explanations begin to fade into a softer blur, you can allow that to happen. The forces we describe will continue to act whether you follow every word or not. They will still be holding you, supporting you, and guiding the motion of the world long after you have fallen asleep. You are still resting in the same place, supported by familiar objects that feel solid and stable. If you pay gentle attention to the way your body touches what is beneath you, you may notice that every point of contact has a quiet sense of weight. Your shoulders or your back sink slightly into the surface. Your arms feel heavier where they lie, and your legs meet the mattress, sofa, or chair with a steady pressure. It is easy to treat this as simply how things are, but this ordinary feeling is a sign of one of the most fundamental influences in the universe, gravity making itself known in a direct, personal way. Gravity is the attraction between objects that have mass. The earth beneath you contains far more mass than anything else nearby, so it pulls your body toward its center with a persistent strength. You do not see anything reaching up from the ground to hold you. You simply feel the result, the slight downward pull that guides a falling object, keeps water in a glass, and makes it natural for you to stand on the floor instead of floating in the air. If the surface under you was suddenly removed, your body would accelerate downward, following this pull, The fact that you are not falling tells you that something beneath you is pushing back. The surface that supports you is constantly responding to gravity. The mattress compresses just enough to match your weight. The legs of a chair or a bed transfer forces into the floor. The floor itself presses into the structure of the building, which passes the load down into the foundations and finally into the ground. At every stage there is a balance between the downward pull of gravity and an upward support force. These two influences are equal in size yet opposite in direction, so they cancel one another. You do not slide, sink, or drift upward. You remain in place because the forces match. You can imagine a simple experiment. Picture a small object resting on a table, perhaps a book or a cup. Gravity pulls it downward, but the table does not allow it to fall. If you remove the table, the object falls freely. If you put the table back, the object once again rests in balance. Nothing changes about the pull of gravity from one moment to the next. What changes is whether there is a surface providing an equal push in the other direction. Your own body behaves in the same way. You are the object. The bed or chair is the table, and the hidden framework of the building carries everything down into the earth. Even when you stand or walk, gravity is present in every step. Your muscles work to lift your body slightly and move it forward, but they always operate within a field that pulls you back downward. When you stand still, your skeleton and muscles share the job of resisting this pull so that you do not collapse. When you sit, some of that work is passed to the furniture around you. This cooperation between your body and your surroundings is so familiar that it usually disappears from awareness. Yet, without gravity, every part of motion would feel different. Thinking about gravity in this way can be quietly grounding. It shows why objects fall, why you feel heavier when you carry something, and why you feel lighter when you set it down. The same rule applies every time, in every place on Earth. You may leave home, travel to another city, or climb a hill, but the attraction from the planet is always acting. Right now, while you lie where you are, that same steady influence keeps you anchored against the surface beneath you, connected to the world under your feet. If you now let your imagination float a little farther away from the room, you can picture the same force that holds you to the bed acting on oceans, mountains, and even the moon. Gravity does not stop at the ceiling. It extends outward in all directions, reaching from the center of Earth into space. The planet beneath you is pulling on the water in the seas and on the rock in the continents just as it pulls on your body. In return, every part of Earth also pulls gently on every other part. This quiet mutual attraction is one of the reasons the world keeps its shape and does not simply scatter. High above the surface, you can imagine the moon circling the planet. The moon is not held up by strings or supported by any visible structure. It is falling constantly toward Earth because of gravity, just as an object falls when you drop it. The difference is that the moon also moves sideways fast enough that, as it falls, it keeps missing the planet. The surface curves away underneath it, and the moon continues in a repeating path, an orbit that has persisted for a very long time. This motion is not mysterious once you see it as a balance between the pull of gravity and the sideways motion of the moon itself. The effects of this relationship are visible in the rise and fall of the tides. As the moon moves around Earth, its gravity pulls more strongly on the side of the planet that faces it, and slightly less on the side that faces away. Oceans, unlike solid rock, can flow and shift, so they respond to these differences. Water gathers in gentle bulges that move as Earth rotates, and as the moon continues in its path. On coastlines, people see this as regular high tides and low tides, arriving in a pattern so reliable that they can be predicted years in advance. You can imagine standing on a shore, watching the water advance and retreat, even though in this moment you may be far from the sea. Underneath that motion is the same gravitational pull that you feel as your own weight. The scale is different, but the rule is the same. The moon and Earth pull on each other, and the water moves in response. Gravity acts without touching, changing the paths of masses across open space. Farther out, the sun exerts gravity on both Earth and the other planets. Earth travels around the sun in a broad orbit that takes 1 year to complete. Just like the moon, Earth is in continuous free fall toward the body it orbits, while its sideways motion keeps it from colliding. This path sets the basic rhythm of the seasons, changing the angle at which sunlight reaches different parts of the planet during the year. The steady return of spring, summer, autumn, and winter is tied to this simple gravitational arrangement. If you gather these images together, you can see that gravity shapes a layered world. At the smallest level you notice, it keeps you resting on a surface. At the next level, it pulls oceans into tides and holds the moon in its journey around Earth. On an even larger scale, it guides Earth and the other planets around the Sun. All of these effects follow the same rule. Masses attract one another. The result is a universe where motion is not random, but patterned, where orbits repeat, tides return, and your own sense of up and down remains the same from one day to the next. Around you, even when the room feels still and quiet, there is an entire ocean of air pressing gently on everything you see. It does not feel like water, and you do not feel yourself sinking in it. But the weight of the atmosphere is real. From the ground up to the edge of space, layers of gas surround Earth, held in place by the same gravity that keeps your body on the bed. Each layer is made of countless tiny molecules moving in every direction, colliding with one another, and with the surfaces of walls, furniture, and skin. Those constant collisions create a steady push that we call air pressure. You can sense the effects of this pressure in small ways. When you travel to a higher altitude, your ears may pop as the air pressure around you changes faster than the pressure inside your body. When you squeeze a sealed plastic bottle on the ground, it feels firm because the air inside presses outward, while the air outside presses inward, holding the shape in balance. If you remove the cap, the resistance fades as the air inside and outside equalizes. These simple experiences are signs that air is not empty space. It behaves like a real substance, even though it is invisible. Inside your lungs, the same principles are at work. When you breathe in, muscles around your chest gently expand the space inside. The pressure in your lungs becomes slightly lower than the pressure outside, so air flows inward to even out the difference. When you breathe out, the muscles relax, the volume decreases, and the pressure inside becomes slightly higher, so air flows back out. You do not need to think about pressure or volume when you breathe. Your body knows the pattern, and the atmosphere responds, allowing oxygen to move in and carbon dioxide to move out in a quiet exchange. The air around you also carries temperature. Warm air makes molecules move faster and spread out more, which can lower the density and change the pressure in a region. Cool air slows those movements and allows air to become more dense. Differences in temperature and pressure across distances create gentle flows. Over great areas, those flows become winds and weather systems. Over the space of a single room, those flows are softer. Warm air from a radiator will rise toward the ceiling. Cooler air near a window may sink. Even if you do not feel a strong draft, subtle currents are slowly stirring, carrying heat, smells, and sounds. The sound you might hear in the distance is another expression of air as a physical medium. When something vibrates, like a speaker or a vocal cord, it pushes and pulls on nearby air molecules. These small changes in pressure travel outward as waves, passing from molecule to molecule until they reach your ears. Your eardrum responds to those pressure variations, and your brain interprets them as sound. Without the air, there would be no way for these vibrations to reach you. Silence in a vacuum is simply the absence of a material to carry pressure waves. Even when the weather outside is changing, the air inside your room is usually kept within a narrow range of pressure and temperature. Walls, windows, and doors slow the movement of air, while heating and cooling systems moderate its conditions. This creates a sheltered pocket where pressure changes are small and gradual. You may not notice that outside, large weather systems are shifting, while inside the atmosphere in your immediate space stays almost constant. That calm envelope of air is part of what makes a room feel safe and familiar. As you rest, the atmosphere continues its work without asking for attention. It presses evenly on your skin and the surfaces around you. It carries oxygen to your lungs and removes the gases you no longer need. It cushions sound, supports weather, and filters sunlight before it reaches the ground. All of this happens through the simple motions of tiny molecules, guided by temperature, gravity, and differences in pressure. The invisible weight of air is always present, creating a quiet, protective layer between you and the vacuum of space above. Outside the walls around you, the same air that presses gently on your skin is constantly moving and rearranging itself. That motion is what you feel as wind. It might seem like a separate phenomenon, something different from the calm air in your room, but wind is simply air flowing from places where the pressure is higher to places where the pressure is lower. The atmosphere is always trying to even itself out. Whenever there is a difference, air begins to move, quietly working to restore balance. You can picture a patch of warm ground under sunlight. The air just above it heats up, the molecules move faster, and they spread slightly farther apart. This warmer air becomes less dense and tends to rise. Cooler, denser air nearby slides in to take its place. That movement creates a breeze. On a very small scale, this happens around buildings, streets, and fields. On a larger scale, it happens between oceans and continents. Over hours and days, these flows build into larger patterns that people recognize as weather systems, drifting from one region to another. Wind can be gentle, like the faint motion that rustles leaves on a tree, or the soft flow through an open window. It can also be strong, bending branches and driving waves across the surface of the sea. In each case, the cause is the same: differences in temperature and pressure, shaped by the rotation of Earth and the curves of the land below. The planet turns steadily, and this rotation adds gentle spirals and curves to the paths of moving air. The result is a complex but organized dance of currents that wrap around the globe. Clouds appear as part of this process. When warm, moist air rises, it cools as it moves to higher altitudes, where the pressure is lower. Cooler air can hold less water vapor, so some of that vapor condenses into tiny droplets. When many droplets gather together, they become visible as a cloud. If they grow large enough and collide often enough, they may form raindrops or snowflakes that fall back to the surface under gravity. What looks like a sudden change in the sky is, underneath, the outcome of countless small interactions between air molecules, water vapor, and temperature. Rain and wind together can feel dramatic when you are outside, yet even storms follow patterns that can be described and predicted. Weather forecasters use measurements of pressure, temperature, and wind from many locations to track these patterns and to anticipate how they will evolve. Although no prediction is perfect, the consistency of the underlying physical rules allows forecasts to be surprisingly accurate. This means that even when the weather appears restless, it is still guided by steady laws. Inside your room, these large atmospheric motions are slowed and softened. Walls stop strong gusts, windows seal out cold drafts, and roofs shed rain. The pressure indoors remains very close to the outdoor pressure, but the movement is quieter. Air still flows, carrying heat from radiators or vents and softening temperature differences between corners of the space. You might notice a faint movement over your skin near a window, or the gentle rise of warm air from a lamp, yet compared to the currents outside, these motions are small and calm. Understanding wind and weather as responses to differences in temperature and pressure can help transform them from something mysterious into something structured. A storm front passing overhead is not a random event. It is part of a chain of causes reaching back to sunlight, ocean currents, Earth's rotation, and the shapes of continents. A breeze at an open window is a small piece of the same pattern, air moving to even out tiny differences between indoors and outdoors. As you lie where you are, all of these processes continue far above rooftops and across horizons you cannot see. Air masses slide past each other, clouds form and fade, rain falls somewhere over land or sea, and winds adjust to new patterns of heating and cooling. Yet where you rest, the air is mostly still, held in a quiet pocket created by the structure around you. The atmosphere outside can be busy, but inside your own space, its motion is reduced to a gentle background, allowing you to feel sheltered while the wider sky continues its patient work. As you settle more deeply into your position, you may notice how little you actually move. Your body rests in one place, and everything around you seems to hold steady. Gravity pulls you downward toward the center of Earth, while the surface beneath you answers with an equal push upward, so you simply feel gently, securely held. The mattress or cushion under you is doing more work than it appears. Inside, springs, foam, or layers of fabric reshape themselves around your body. Where your shoulders, hips, or back press more strongly, the material compresses more. Where the pressure is lighter, it compresses less. In every place, the upward support matches the downward pull of gravity. You do not sink endlessly, and you do not bounce away. You come to rest at the point where these invisible pushes and pulls are in balance. Friction quietly helps to keep everything in place. The fibers of the sheet grip the surface of the mattress. The pillowcase holds to the pillow beneath it. The fabric of your clothing touches the material under you in countless tiny spots. At each spot, microscopic bumps and ridges press together, creating resistance to sliding. Because of this, your pillow does not slip when you turn your head, and your blanket does not drift to the floor with small movements. Tiny motions are softened and fade into stillness. The bed frame or chair legs send the load from your body into the floor. The floor passes it into beams, columns, and walls, and these structures transfer everything into the ground beneath the building. Gravity pulls on every part of this chain, from your body to the foundation, and every part responds by pushing back. Engineers design such structures so that the forces stay well within safe limits. The result is a frame that can support you quietly, hour after hour, without you needing to think about it. Air surrounds you as an invisible cushion. It presses on your skin from every direction, yet you do not feel crushed or stretched. The pressure inside your body balances the pressure outside. Blood, tissues, and the air in your lungs push outward, just as the atmosphere pushes inward. If the pressure around you changes slightly, your body makes small adjustments until balance returns. Most of the time, these changes are too subtle to notice. Inside your body, many processes continue on their own. Your heart generates pressure with each beat, sending blood through branching vessels. Muscles maintain just enough tone to keep your posture comfortable, even when you think of yourself as completely relaxed. Joints and ligaments hold bones in alignment, resisting sudden shifts. Control systems in your nervous system watch tension, pressure, and flow and respond without needing your conscious input. All of these influences together create something you can sense directly, a feeling of being safely held. You are not floating in an unstable space where any motion might send you drifting away. You are anchored, supported from below, wrapped by air, and surrounded by walls and structures that have been standing for years. The same laws of physics that guide planets in their orbit also shape this room and the way your body rests within it. You do not have to make yourself fall asleep. Sleep is not a switch you can force with effort. What you can do is allow the supports that already exist to do their work. Gravity will continue to hold you in place. The mattress will continue to meet you with equal pressure. Friction will continue to keep your surroundings from sliding away. The building will continue to send all of these loads safely into the ground. If sleep begins to approach now, you can simply let it come, knowing that nothing about the underlying forces will change when your awareness fades. If sleep does not come yet, that is completely fine. The same invisible framework will keep holding you, moment after moment, without needing your attention. You are already resting inside a stable web of forces that can carry you through the night, whether you are awake, drowsy, or quietly asleep. You are still resting in the same place, but the world around you is not only shaped by gravity and air. Another family of invisible influences is always present, touching almost everything you see, even if you do not notice them. These are electromagnetic forces. They are responsible for the way charges attract and repel, for the behavior of magnets, and for the light that reaches your eyes. In many ways, they are even more woven into your daily life than gravity, yet they hide inside familiar experiences so neatly that it is easy to overlook them. You may remember a moment when you walked across a carpet, reached for a metal doorknob, and felt a small, sharp spark. For a brief instant, a tiny shock jumped from your fingertip to the metal. That sensation was caused by electric charges moving suddenly. As you walked, friction between your shoes and the floor shifted charges onto your body. When you touched the doorknob, The difference in charge corrected itself in a quick, narrow discharge that your nerves felt as a sting. Nothing appeared in the air. There was no visible thread connecting you to the metal, yet the movement of charge was real and measurable. Something similar happens when you take off a sweater in a dry room and hear a faint crackling sound, or when fine hairs on your arms stand up under certain conditions. Charges have built up in one place and are trying to redistribute. Electrons, the small charged particles inside atoms, move from one surface to another, leaving one region slightly positive and another slightly negative. Opposite charges attract, like charges repel. These simple tendencies give rise to a wide range of effects, from tiny sparks to the currents that power lamps and computers. Magnetism is another face of the same underlying force. You might think of a magnet holding a note against a refrigerator door. The magnet does not fall away, even though gravity pulls it downward. Instead, it clings tightly to the metal. If you take two magnets and bring their opposite ends together, you feel a sudden pull as they snap into alignment. If you try to press the same ends together, they seem to resist, as if an invisible cushion stands between them. This is the magnetic force at work, a pattern in space created by moving charges and by the internal structure of certain materials. Scientists use the word field to describe how these forces extend outward from charges and magnets. A field is a way of saying that in every point in space around an object, there is a certain influence that would push or pull a test charge if it were placed there. You do not see lines of force radiating from a charged object or from a magnet, but you can observe how other objects respond. Iron filings sprinkled near a magnet line up in curved patterns that map the field. A charged balloon will gently pull small scraps of paper upward from a table. These responses reveal the shape of something invisible but real. In your room, fields are everywhere. Electric fields exist around any region where there is a difference in charge, such as the surfaces of electronic components inside devices. Magnetic fields appear around currents flowing in wires or in the permanent magnets of loudspeakers and motors. Most of the time, these fields are weak enough that you do not feel them directly. Instead, you notice their organized results. Lights glow when you flip a switch. Speakers produce sound when currents vary in time. Screens change color and brightness when controlled voltages are applied. The same electromagnetic force is also responsible for the light that lets you see the room at all. Light is a self-propagating pattern of electric and magnetic fields that travels through space at high speed. In later moments we will look at that in more detail. But for now it is enough to know that the soft glow you might see from a lamp or a hallway is another expression of the same invisible rules. Charges move, fields arise, and energy flows from sources to your eyes. As you lie there, nothing about these electromagnetic processes requires your attention or effort. Circuits in your surroundings quietly guide charges along specific paths. Magnets hold to metal surfaces with steady strength. Tiny imbalances in charge equalize and then fade. The world of fields and forces continues whether you are thinking about it or not. By bringing these patterns into awareness for a moment, you can see that many everyday events that once seemed like small surprises are in fact part of a single, coherent structure. Then, if you wish, you can let that understanding soften at the edges, returning once more to the simple feeling of resting while invisible forces continue their orderly work around you. Light may seem like something simple. You flip a switch, a room brightens, the sun rises, and the world becomes visible. Yet the glow that reaches your eyes is another expression of invisible structure. What you call light is a pattern in electric and magnetic fields moving together through space. Even when the source looks small, like a lamp in the corner or the faint shine from a hallway, the space between you and that source is filled with these fields changing in a very specific way. You can imagine light as a repeating pattern, a wave that carries energy from one place to another. In water, a wave is easy to picture. The surface rises and falls as ripples travel outward. In air, sound behaves similarly, with regions of slightly higher and lower pressure moving from a vibrating source to your ears. For light, there is no need for a material medium. Instead, the electric field and the magnetic field support one another. As one changes, it creates a change in the other, and together they advance through space. Different types of light have different wavelengths, the distance between one crest of the wave and the next. Your eyes are sensitive to a narrow band of wavelengths, which you see as colors. Longer wavelengths in this band appear red, intermediate ones appear green, and shorter ones appear blue or violet. When these wavelengths are mixed in various proportions, they produce the wide range of colors you see in objects and scenes. When many wavelengths are present together in roughly equal amounts, the light appears white. Beyond the range your eyes can detect, the electromagnetic spectrum continues. Longer than visible red are infrared waves, which you feel as warmth from a heater or from sunlight on your skin, even if you do not see them. Longer still are microwaves and radio waves, used to carry signals for communication and broadcasting. Shorter than visible violet are ultraviolet waves, which can cause sunburn if the skin is exposed for too long, and beyond that lie X-rays and gamma rays. All of these are the same kind of wave, differing only in wavelength and energy. In your room, the light that lets you see shapes and surfaces is part of this spectrum. Photons, which are the smallest units of light, stream outward from bulbs or screens, and from any small openings to the outside. They scatter from walls, floors, and objects, changing direction each time they encounter a surface. Some are absorbed and converted into a tiny amount of heat. Others reflect into your eyes, where cells in the retina respond. The patterns of light reaching those cells allow your brain to reconstruct the layout of the space around you. The way light behaves is closely tied to the electromagnetic forces on charges. When electrons in atoms or in solid materials change their state, they can emit or absorb photons. The color of the light depends on the energy difference between these states. That is why heating metal until it glows produces a certain color pattern, and why different gases emit distinct colors in neon signs. The rules that govern these processes are consistent, which is why the same materials always give off the same characteristic light. Even when light levels are low, the same principles apply. A dim lamp, a night light, or the faint glow of a distant window still produces electromagnetic waves that travel in straight paths until they are absorbed or scattered. Shadows appear where objects block those paths. Soft gradients appear where light comes from many directions and blends together. The gentle way light falls across fabric or skin is an outcome of countless photons being emitted, scattered, and absorbed according to well-tested laws. As you look around, or simply sense the presence of light behind closed eyelids, you are interacting with a structure that stretches from your immediate surroundings out into space. The same type of wave that illuminates your room also crosses the distance from stars to Earth, travels through the emptiness between planets, and carries information from remote spacecraft back to ground stations. Wherever these waves go, they follow the same basic rules, linking your small, quiet environment to a much larger universe of electromagnetic activity. In the room around you, many objects that seem quiet and still are inside, part of a guided flow of electric charges. When you look at a lamp, a charger, or a screen, you are seeing the effects of currents that move through wires and components, but never spill out into the air. The walls hide cables and connectors. At a switch, a small movement of your hand can open or close a path that allows charges to move. You do not see the charges themselves. You notice only what happens when they are given a route. Bulbs glow, devices start, indicator lights come alive. Electric current is simply charges moving through a conductor, usually electrons drifting through metal. They do not rush like water in a pipe. Each electron moves relatively slowly, passing energy along as it interacts with its neighbors. When a circuit is complete, an electric field appears along the wire and pushes on charges throughout the entire path almost at once. That is why, when you flip a switch, the lamp responds nearly instantly, even though the individual particles inside its filament are not traveling quickly from one end of the circuit to the other. You can imagine a loop of wire that runs from a power source, through a lamp, and back again. When the loop is open at the switch, the chain is broken, and charges cannot complete their journey. When the switch is closed, the loop is restored, and current can flow. The energy carried by the charges is converted into other forms where the circuit is designed to do work. In a lamp, electrical energy becomes light and a little heat. In a heater, more of the energy becomes warmth. In a motor, electrical energy becomes motion. Safety features are built into this network to keep the invisible forces within safe boundaries. Insulation around wires prevents charges from leaving their intended paths. Circuit breakers and fuses disconnect power if currents become too large. Ground connections give stray charges a preferred path back to the earth. Because of these measures, the electric fields that guide currents usually stay inside conductors and devices, doing their work without presenting a hazard. Even small electronic devices close to you depend on subtle electric forces. Inside a phone, a tablet, or a computer, patterns of voltage in tiny circuits represent information. When you touch a screen, sensors detect small changes in electric fields and translate your gesture into signals. Processors respond by changing currents in microscopic components, switching them on and off in timed sequences. You do not see these changes. You see images update, text scroll, or sound start to play. In the space where you are now, some circuits are active and others are resting. Devices that are switched off have open paths with no continuous current. Others may be idling, drawing only small amounts of power to maintain a clock, a memory state, or a standby indicator. Through all of this, the same rules apply. Charges move in closed loops, guided by electric fields, constrained by conductors, and limited by safety protections. When you picture this network at work, you can imagine lines of influence running through the walls and along cables, turning corners, climbing floors, and settling into sockets and devices. Currents rise and fall according to need. Fields grow and shrink as switches change position, and the whole system follows clear rules. Knowing that these invisible patterns are orderly and well understood can make it easier to look at the lights and electronics around you as part of a predictable landscape rather than a hidden source of uncertainty. All around you, even when nothing electrical seems to be moving, magnetic forces are present. You can picture a small bar magnet, one end labeled north, the other south. When you bring the north end close to the south end of another magnet, they pull strongly together. When you try to press two north ends together, they resist, as if a soft, invisible cushion pushes them apart. Nothing visible fills the gap between them, yet you feel a definite force in your hands. That is magnetism revealing itself through your muscles and skin. A magnet creates a magnetic field in the space around it, an influence that tells other magnets and some metals how to move if they come close. You can make this field visible in a simple way. If you sprinkle iron filings on a thin sheet and place a magnet beneath it, the filings slowly rotate and slide into curved patterns. They trace out lines that loop from one pole to the other, showing where a tiny magnetic needle would point at each spot. The filings do not know about fields. They only respond to forces where they sit, yet together they draw a map of something you cannot see directly. Now you can extend that idea from a small bar magnet to the entire planet. Inside Earth, moving electric currents in the liquid outer core generate a magnetic field that reaches far into space. In many ways, Earth behaves like an enormous magnet with its own north and south magnetic poles. If you hold a compass flat in your hand, its needle is a small magnet free to rotate. It aligns itself with the local direction of Earth's field, turning until one end points roughly toward the magnetic north. This simple device allows sailors, hikers, and pilots to keep a sense of direction even when the sky is cloudy or landmarks are out of sight. The magnetic field does more than guide compasses. It also helps shield the planet. Charged particles arriving from the sun and from space feel forces when they enter this field. Instead of plunging straight toward the ground, many of them spiral along field lines or are deflected away. Near the polar regions, some particles follow the lines downward into the upper atmosphere, where they collide with atoms and molecules of gas. These collisions transfer energy and cause the atoms to emit light, creating flowing shapes you know as the aurora. You can imagine this from your resting place. Far above you, in a thin layer of air near the poles, faint curtains of green and red may be shimmering in the night. They wave and twist, following the invisible lines of Earth's magnetic field as charged particles interact with the atmosphere. You do not see this from inside your room, but it is part of the same system that makes a compass work on a table near you. The quiet needle turning and the grand lights in the sky are two faces of the same underlying structure. Closer to home, magnets appear in everyday devices. Small speakers use magnetic fields to move a diaphragm back and forth, pushing on the air to create sound. Electric motors use magnets and currents together so that invisible forces produce rotation, turning electrical energy into motion. Latches, sensors, and storage devices all take advantage of the way magnets influence certain materials. In each case, the field remains unseen, but its presence is obvious in the way things move and respond. As you lie still, these magnetic influences remain gentle and steady. Earth's field passes through the room, through the walls, and through your body without causing any sensation. Magnets inside devices continue to hold or push as designed. The same rules apply from the small magnets in everyday objects to the global field that reaches high into space. Knowing this, you can picture yourself resting inside a web of magnetic influences that are stable, measured, and quietly shaping motion all around you. Even when the air in your room feels quiet, it is carrying more than just temperature and smell. It is also filled with faint patterns of electromagnetic waves that carry information. These waves do not disturb papers on tables or move the curtains. Their energy is low, and their presence is subtle. Yet they connect radios to stations, phones to towers, and devices to routers, creating invisible links between your resting place and distant points on Earth and in orbit. You can imagine a radio station with a tall antenna on a hill. Inside the station, sound is converted into an electrical signal that changes smoothly with the music or voices being broadcast. That changing signal is then used to modulate a radio wave, slightly adjusting its strength or frequency in a controlled pattern. The antenna launches this wave into the surrounding space. As it travels, it spreads outward like a broad, expanding shell, passing over fields, buildings, and streets. Far away, a small radio in someone's home has its own antenna, a simple metal rod or a coil of wire. When the radio wave from the station passes by, it makes charges in that antenna move back and forth in step with the changing field. Inside the radio, circuits pick out one particular station from among many by focusing on a specific frequency. They extract the pattern, amplify it, and convert it back into sound. The speaker's vibrations recreate the original voices and music. Between the station and the listener, no wires are needed. Only the structured motion of the electromagnetic field in the air connects them. Something similar happens with Wi-Fi and mobile phones, although the details are more complex. A router in your home or office sends out pulses of electromagnetic energy at high frequency, shaped into codes that represent bits of data. Laptops and phones nearby have antennas tuned to the same range. They listen for patterns that match the expected format, interpret them, and respond with their own signals. Together, these devices build conversations of numbers and letters, quietly exchanging requests, responses, images, and messages through the air. GPS relies on waves traveling over much greater distances. Satellites orbiting Earth carry precise clocks. Each satellite continuously broadcasts a timing signal, a steady stream of information that includes the exact moment each message was sent. A GPS receiver on the ground listens to several satellites at once. By comparing the arrival times of these signals, it can calculate how far away each satellite is. From those distances and the known positions of the satellites, the receiver determines its own position on Earth's surface, often with remarkable accuracy. In your room, these signals flow through you and around you without any sensation. Their strengths are kept low by design, limited by regulations and engineering choices, so that devices can communicate without overwhelming one another. Many signals weaken quickly with distance or are blocked by walls, floors, and ceilings, which helps confine them to the spaces where they are needed. Others are designed to pass more easily through obstacles, reaching basements, vehicles, and remote areas. If you think of the space around you as empty, it can be surprising to realize how much ordered activity is taking place in it. Waves carrying news from distant cities, navigation data from orbiting satellites, and simple messages between nearby devices all travel invisibly through the same region of air. Yet they do not collide in a chaotic way. Each type of signal is assigned its own range of frequencies and patterns, allowing receivers to separate one stream from another. The result is a layered landscape of gentle influences, quietly connecting your sheltered space to the wider world without disturbing the stillness in which you rest. All around you, the air that feels so still is quietly crossed by many gentle signals. Radio waves from distant transmitters, Wi-Fi signals from a nearby router, and timing pulses from satellites far above all pass through the same volume of space where you are resting. They do not push on your body or disturb the air like a breeze. Their strengths are low, and they are carefully limited by design. Most of the time, the only sign of their presence is a small symbol on a screen showing that a device is connected. You can imagine these signals as very faint ripples in an invisible pond, each one following its own pattern. Some carry music and speech from broadcasting stations, others carry packets of data for messages and pages, and some simply say, "I am here, this is the time," as GPS satellites do. Every wave occupies a particular range of frequencies and follows precise rules. Receivers are built to listen only to the patterns they expect, ignoring the rest as background. In this way, many different conversations can share the same space without dissolving into confusion. Engineers and regulators work together to set limits on how strong these signals may be. Power levels, frequencies, and usage patterns are tested and controlled so that devices can operate safely and reliably in homes, workplaces, and public spaces. Long before a phone or a router reaches you, its behavior has been measured and checked. The quiet sea of signals around you is not a wild or unknown environment. It is a managed landscape, mapped and monitored so that it remains within known bounds. As you lie where you are, you might choose to turn some devices off for the night, letting screens go dark and notifications pause. Or you might leave them in standby, their circuits idling at low power, listening and speaking only occasionally. Either way, the electromagnetic background around you remains gentle. It does not surge in unpredictable bursts or demand a response from your body. It is simply another layer of structure in the air, carrying information while you rest. If your mind has ever worried about unseen influences, it can be helpful to remember that these signals are understood, measured, and designed to be faint compared to the forces you already live with every day. Like gravity and air pressure, they are tools created to send messages and coordinates, not uncontrolled currents rushing through space. Knowing this, you can allow your thoughts about them to soften and drift to the edges of awareness. If sleep has not yet arrived, that is completely fine. You are already lying in a stable, protected pocket of air, surrounded by signals that quietly mind their own business. You can let your breathing slow, feel the support beneath you, and allow your attention to loosen. Whether you remain awake a little longer or begin to drift, the invisible exchanges of information in the air will continue calmly in the background, asking nothing of you while your body and mind move gradually toward rest. The objects around you feel solid and dependable. The bed frame holds its shape, the walls stand straight, and the floor supports everything above it. It is easy to think of these things as single, continuous pieces of matter. In reality, each one is made from countless tiny units, atoms, joined together by invisible forces. The strength and firmness you feel when you touch a surface are the result of electrical attractions at a scale far smaller than your eyes can see. Every atom has a positively charged nucleus and negatively charged electrons arranged around it. The positive and negative charges attract, keeping the electrons from drifting away. When atoms come close to one another, their outer electrons can interact. In some cases, atoms share pairs of electrons, forming what is called a covalent bond. In others, electrons move from one atom to another, leaving one positively charged and the other negatively charged. The attraction between these opposite charges forms an ionic bond. Both types of bond are expressions of the same electromagnetic force acting in different arrangements. You can imagine each bond as a tiny connection, a stable compromise between attractions and repulsions. If you could zoom in far enough on a piece of wood, metal, or plastic, you would not see a featureless block, you would see atoms arranged in patterns, with electrons linking them into networks. In a metal, electrons are more free to move, allowing the material to conduct electricity and share forces across large distances. In a crystal, atoms sit in repeating, orderly positions. In more flexible materials, the arrangement is less regular, which allows the structure to bend without breaking. The way these bonds are arranged determines how a material behaves. If the bonds are strong and tightly packed, the material is hard and resists scratching. If they are layered in a way that allows sheets to slide over one another, the material may be soft or flaky. If there are gaps or irregularities in the structure, it might be brittle, breaking rather than bending when stressed. When you press your hand against a wall or a table, you are feeling the collective response of countless atomic bonds that stretch and recover by tiny amounts, sharing the load across a vast number of connections. Even the elasticity of objects, their ability to return to their original shape after being pressed or bent, comes from the behavior of these bonds. When a mattress compresses beneath you, some bonds in its materials are slightly stretched or rotated. When the pressure is removed, they pull back, bringing the structure closer to its original arrangement. This happens in springs, foam cells, and fibers alike. The invisible forces between atoms and molecules guide each small adjustment until the overall shape settles again. Inside the walls and floor, similar interactions are always present. Atoms in concrete, metal supports, and wooden beams hold one another with steady strength. They respond to changing loads from weather, movement, and time. They expand a little when warm, contract when cool, and transmit forces deeper into the structure. Yet, at every moment, the bonds between atoms maintain a continuous framework, turning what could have been loose piles of particles into sturdy, unified forms. As you rest, none of these bonds switch off. They hold quietly, moment after moment, keeping surfaces solid and shapes intact. The firmness you feel under your hand or along your back is a message from billions of atoms bound together by electromagnetic forces. You do not see these bonds, and you do not need to control them. They are part of the deep architecture of matter itself, always present, silently maintaining the stability of the world that supports you. Around you, matter appears in different forms: solid furniture, liquid water in a glass, air that you breathe. All three are made of molecules, yet each behaves in a distinct way. The difference lies not only in temperature, but also in the invisible forces between those molecules. These are intermolecular forces, attractions and repulsions that guide how closely molecules sit together, how easily they move, and whether a substance feels rigid, flowing, or free. In a gas like the air, molecules move rapidly and are far apart on the scale of their own size. They collide and then fly on, spending most of their time with no neighbors pressing close. Intermolecular forces are present, but they are weak compared to the kinetic energy of their motion. That is why gases fill any container, spreading out evenly, and why they are easy to compress. In a liquid, molecules are closer together. They still move and slide past one another, but they remain in near constant contact. Attractions between them are stronger, enough to keep the substance together, but not enough to lock it into a fixed shape. In a solid, molecules or atoms hold positions in a more stable structure. They vibrate in place but do not swap neighbors easily. Intermolecular forces are strong enough here to maintain a definite shape. You can picture water in all three states. As ice, the molecules arrange themselves in a delicate lattice, each one hydrogen bonded to neighbors, in a pattern that leaves small gaps. This structure makes ice less dense than liquid water, allowing it to float. As liquid, water molecules stay close but move freely, constantly forming and breaking bonds as they slide past one another. As steam, they separate and spread, rushing through space with only brief encounters. The same molecules, the same chemical composition, behave differently because the balance between motion and intermolecular forces has changed. Cohesion is the name for the attraction between molecules of the same substance. In water, cohesion allows droplets to form rounded shapes as the molecules hold together. On a surface, this cohesion can create beads of water, especially if the surface does not attract the molecules strongly. Adhesion is the attraction between different substances. When water climbs slightly up the side of a glass, or spreads into a thin film on a clean surface, adhesion is at work. The competition between cohesion and adhesion shapes how liquids' wet surfaces form droplets or pull into thin layers. Surface tension is a direct result of these forces. Molecules at the surface of a liquid experience different surroundings than those deeper inside. Below them, neighbors pull from all directions. At the surface, there are no molecules above, so the pull from below and to the sides creates a kind of stretched skin. This makes the surface resist small disturbances. You see it when a droplet holds together, when a small object like a needle can float if placed gently on water, or when some insects stand on a pond without sinking, their legs dimpling the surface but not breaking through. In the room where you rest, intermolecular forces are quietly shaping many details. The firmness of the materials under you, the way condensation forms on a cold window, the way a drink holds together in a glass, and the way a thin film of moisture clings to your skin are all outcomes of these tiny attractions. Even though you never see individual molecules, you can see their collective decisions everywhere. The solid, liquid, and gas around you are three different expressions of the same underlying ingredients, organized by temperature, motion, and the invisible forces that bind molecules together. Every time you move, even slightly, an invisible partner moves with you. That partner is friction, the quiet resistance that appears whenever two surfaces slide or try to slide past one another. You rarely see friction directly, yet it is the reason you can walk without slipping, sit without sliding to the floor, and hold objects in your hands without having them drift away. It is a force that constantly opposes motion along a surface, turning motion into warmth and helping the world stay steady. If you think of the floor beneath your feet, it may look smooth and flat. At a microscopic level, however, it is full of tiny ridges and valleys. The soles of your shoes have their own irregularities and textures. When you stand, these small bumps press into one another. If you try to move, some of them catch, resisting the shift. The same happens between skin and fabric, between paper and desk, between any two materials in contact. Friction arises from these small contacts and from the electrical attractions between atoms where surfaces meet. You can feel friction clearly when you rub your hands together. At first there is only resistance, the sense that your palms do not glide freely. Then, as you continue, you start to notice warmth. Mechanical energy from the motion is being converted into thermal energy. The small irregularities on each skin surface are bending and snapping past each other, and the atoms there are jostled more intensely. The same process happens in many other places. Brakes in a moving vehicle slow the wheels by pressing surfaces together so that friction drains energy from the motion, turning it into heat. In your room, friction is quietly at work, holding your surroundings in place. The legs of a chair do not slide across the floor under your weight, because friction resists the beginning of motion. A book remains where you leave it on a table, unless a strong enough push overcomes the static friction between its cover and the surface. Even the blankets on your bed stay draped over you, largely because friction between layers of fabric and between fabric and mattress prevents them from slipping free at the slightest movement. There is also friction inside your body. When joints move, surfaces coated with smooth cartilage and lubricated by fluid slide past each other. The design of these joints reduces friction to protect tissues from wear, yet some resistance remains. Muscles and tendons pull against bones and connective tissue, and internal organs can shift slightly against their neighbors as you breathe or turn. Wherever contact exists, some form of friction is present, shaping how easily things move and how much effort motion requires. Although friction can cause wear and energy loss, it is also essential for stability. Without it, a foot placed on the floor would slide as easily as a skate on ice. Objects would not stay where you set them. Vehicles could not accelerate or brake. The simple act of sitting upright would be difficult, because nothing would resist the slightest sideways force. The roughness and the intermolecular attractions that create friction transform surfaces from slippery planes into reliable supports. As you rest now, friction is one of the reasons everything feels still. Your body does not slowly drift to one side of the bed. The pillow remains under your head. The furniture does not creep across the room. Countless tiny contacts, each with its own small resistance, combine to hold the scene around you in place. You do not have to think about these forces or adjust them. They are simply part of the way matter touches matter, a constant, invisible grip that helps the world remain quietly where it is, while you lie in one position and allow your muscles to let go. If you picture a thin glass tube dipped into a bowl of water, something quietly surprising happens. The water inside the narrow tube rises slightly above the level of the water in the bowl, as if it were climbing against gravity. There is no pump hidden in the glass. The water lifts itself by way of invisible forces between its own molecules and the molecules of the glass. This gentle motion is called capillary action, and it plays a larger role in the world than its small scale suggests. Water molecules are attracted to one another by cohesion, and they are also attracted to many solid surfaces by adhesion. Inside a narrow tube, the adhesive pull from the glass on the water near the walls combines with the cohesive pull between neighboring water molecules. Together, these forces tug the liquid upward. Gravity pulls downward, trying to bring the water back to level, but in very narrow spaces the molecular attractions are strong enough to win, and the water stays slightly higher. You can see a related effect when a paper towel touches a small spill. The liquid creeps into the fibers, moving upward against gravity as it spreads. Each tiny channel between fibers acts like a narrow tube, drawing fluid along by capillary forces. Soil behaves similarly. Water seeps into fine pores between grains of sand and particles of clay, climbing through the ground and distributing moisture where plant roots can reach it. Plants rely heavily on these forces. In the thin vessels within stems and leaves, capillary action helps water move from roots toward the upper parts of the plant. It is not the only mechanism involved, but it contributes to the overall flow, helping to overcome gravity over considerable heights. The same type of attraction that holds droplets together and lets water cling to surfaces also assists in lifting water through delicate channels. Even in your immediate surroundings, capillary effects appear in small ways. A thin line of moisture creeping along the edge of a glass, condensation collecting along a narrow groove, or a spill spreading through a woven fabric are all expressions of tiny forces at work. You may blot a spill with a cloth without thinking about why the liquid moves. But beneath that simple action, countless molecules are responding to the pull of cohesion and adhesion. From where you rest, these motions are too small to feel. They change the distribution of water in materials, not the larger structure of the room. Yet they are part of the same network of invisible influences that shape the world. Gravity pulls downward. Molecular forces pull along surfaces and through narrow spaces. Between them, liquids find paths, climb short distances, and settle into patterns that often go unnoticed, even as they quietly support life and everyday tasks. Inside your body, an entire system of forces is at work, moving fluids, supporting structures, and coordinating motion without needing your deliberate control. While you rest, your heart continues to contract and relax in a steady rhythm, generating pressure that pushes blood through arteries and veins. With each beat, blood presses against vessel walls, and those walls respond with their own elastic resistance, stretching slightly and then returning toward their original shape. Blood pressure is a measure of how strongly this fluid presses from the inside. It must be high enough to carry oxygen and nutrients to distant tissues, but not so high that it strains the vessels. Muscles in the vessel walls can tighten or relax, changing their diameter and adjusting the resistance to flow. This constant balancing act keeps circulation within a healthy range, even as you change position, breathe, or shift from wakefulness towards sleep. Muscles create force by contracting. At rest, many muscles maintain a low level of activity, called tone, that helps preserve posture and joint stability. When you move, more fibers engage, pulling on tendons that connect to bones. The tendons transfer tension to the skeleton, causing joints to rotate and limbs to move. Ligaments add passive support by holding bones in alignment, resisting motion beyond safe limits. In every action, outward or inward, there is a pattern of forces that pull, resist, and guide. The lungs operate through pressure differences as well. When the diaphragm contracts and moves downward, and muscles around the ribs expand the chest, the volume inside increases. The pressure in the lungs drops slightly below the atmospheric pressure outside, and air flows in. When these muscles relax, the elastic tissues of the lungs and chest wall recoil, the volume decreases, and air is pushed out. You do not feel this as a series of calculations. You feel it as the simple rise and fall of breath. Even digestion involves mechanical forces. Muscular walls in the esophagus and intestines squeeze food and fluid along in rhythmic waves. Valves and sphincters open and close at coordinated times, allowing movement in one direction while preventing backflow. Fluids mix, pressures change, and contents move from one region to the next, all guided by automatic signals and the physical properties of tissues and contents. As you lie quietly, you might feel only your heartbeat and breathing if you focus closely. Yet beneath that, a rich landscape of pressures, tensions, and flows is active. Blood travels around circuits, joints maintain alignment, and organs shift slightly as the chest expands and contracts. All of it takes place under the same physical laws that govern water in pipes and air in ducts, adjusted by the living structure of cells and tissues. Your body is not escaping the rules of physics. It is using them, organizing forces on many scales to keep you balanced, nourished, and ready for rest. While you continue to rest, many of the forces inside you begin to move in a quieter pattern. Heart rate may drift a little lower, blood pressure may ease, and muscles release some of the tension they held when you were standing, walking, or concentrating. You do not have to direct these changes. They are guided by control systems that respond to signals from within the body and from the environment, gradually shifting you toward a calmer state. The autonomic nervous system plays a central role in this process. One branch prepares you for activity, increasing heart rate and blood flow to muscles when you need to respond to the world. Another branch supports rest and recovery, encouraging slower heartbeats, deeper breathing, and digestion. As you lie still and the demands of the day begin to fade, the balance between these branches shifts. Less energy is devoted to readying you for action, and more is devoted to maintenance and repair. Blood vessels adjust their tone as this balance changes. In some areas they widen slightly, reducing resistance and allowing blood to flow more easily. In others they narrow just enough to maintain stable pressure. The overall effect is a redistribution of forces within the circulatory system, easing strain on the heart and vessels. The heart does not stop working, it simply works at a gentler pace, still pushing blood through the network but with less forceful contractions. Muscles follow a similar pattern. When you are active, they maintain tension to support posture, move limbs, and keep balance. When you lie down, much of this work is no longer necessary. Gravity still acts on your body, but the support from the bed or chair shares the load. Muscles can let go of unnecessary contractions. Joints settle into positions where ligaments and surfaces handle more of the supporting work, allowing fibers to lengthen and relax. Breathing often becomes slower and more regular as well. The diaphragm and chest muscles still create pressure differences to draw air in and out, but the rhythm may become smoother, with fewer abrupt changes. Each breath moves sufficient air for the quieter demands of the resting body, and the lungs exchange gases efficiently with each cycle. This calm breathing pattern can, in turn, reinforce signals of safety and ease to the nervous system. If you notice that you are not yet asleep, that is completely fine. The transition towards sleep is not a single moment but a gradual reshaping of activity and forces throughout the body. Even in full wakefulness, simply lying down and breathing steadily allows many systems to shift into a lower gear. You can allow this process to unfold without pushing it. Gravity continues to hold you, the mattress continues to support you, and your internal forces continue to organize themselves in your favor. Whether you drift into sleep in the next minutes or remain quietly awake a little longer, your body is already engaging the same physical patterns that make rest restorative. Far above your resting place, in the thin air at the edge of space, another kind of balance between forces shapes motion. Satellites and spacecraft travel in paths around Earth, held by the same gravity that you feel as weight, yet they do not fall to the ground. Instead, they are in continuous free fall, always being pulled toward the planet but moving sideways fast enough that they keep missing it. This combination of pull and motion creates an orbit. You can imagine standing on a high mountain and throwing a ball horizontally. If you throw it gently, it arcs downward and lands not far away. If you could throw it harder, it would travel farther before striking the ground. If you could somehow throw it fast enough, and if there were no air to slow it, the ball would fall toward Earth as the surface curved away beneath it. Instead of landing, it would keep circling, always falling, never reaching the ground. A satellite works in much the same way, launched to a speed and altitude where its path curves around the planet. In orbit, everything nearby shares the same free fall. A spacecraft, its instruments, and the people inside, if it carries any, all fall together under the influence of gravity. Relative to one another, they feel weightless, even though gravity is still strong at that height. Objects float because there is no surface pushing back with an equal force, not because gravity has vanished. The familiar sense of weight that you feel comes from the support forces of the ground or bed, not from gravity alone. These orbital paths are not guessed. They are calculated using the same physical laws that describe falling objects and planetary motion. Engineers and scientists can predict where a satellite will be at a given time, how long it will take to circle Earth, and how small corrections in speed will change its path. This predictability allows satellites to maintain positions for communication, weather observation, navigation, and research, often for many years. From where you rest, you do not see the satellites overhead, but their presence quietly influences your world. Weather maps that show clouds sweeping across continents, navigation systems that guide travelers, and communication links that reach remote places all depend on devices moving steadily through their orbits. Each one is a small object in a vast space, guided by gravity along a path that can be described with simple principles. Thinking of orbits in this way connects your sense of weight on the bed to the motion of objects high above. The same gravitational pull that anchors you also shapes the arcs of satellites and spacecraft. What changes is the balance between pull and sideways motion, and whether there is a surface to provide support. In the room, the bed and floor supply the missing force, giving you weight. In orbit, there is no such support, so objects remain in free fall, tracing broad circles around the planet as they follow the curvature of space and the rules of motion. The sun does more than provide light and warmth. It also sends out a continual stream of charged particles into space, a flow known as the solar wind. These particles, mainly electrons and protons, rush outward in all directions, carrying energy and magnetic influences with them. As this wind reaches Earth, it encounters the planet's own magnetic field, and the interaction between them shapes a protective region around the world. Earth's magnetic field extends far into space, forming a structure sometimes called the magnetosphere. When the solar wind approaches, its charged particles feel forces from this field. Instead of moving straight toward the surface, many are diverted, flowing around the planet or becoming trapped in regions where the field lines form loops. The overall effect is that much of the solar wind is kept at a distance, and only a smaller fraction of the particles reach the upper atmosphere. Near the polar regions, some of these trapped particles spiral down along magnetic field lines toward the thin air high above the surface. There they collide with atoms and molecules of oxygen and nitrogen. These collisions transfer energy, exciting the atmospheric particles. As they return to their lower energy states, they emit light. When many such events occur, the result is the aurora, broad curtains and arcs of color that shimmer and shift across the night sky. Shades of green, red, and sometimes purple appear, tracing the paths of field lines invisible to the eye. From your position indoors, you do not see the structure of the magnetosphere or the paths of particles. You may never have seen an aurora in person. Yet these phenomena are part of the same system that makes a compass needle turn. The global magnetic field that passes quietly through the room extends outward, shaping how solar particles move and how energy from the sun is distributed near Earth. The atmosphere itself, also contributes to protection. As particles and high-energy radiation encounter air molecules, they lose energy through collisions and interactions. By the time these influences reach ground level, their strength is greatly reduced. The thick blanket of air above you, together with the magnetic shield around the planet, creates a layered defense that has allowed life to persist despite the continual outflow from the sun. Thinking about these interactions can transform the space around you from a small, isolated room into a point within a large, structured environment. Above the ceiling, through the atmosphere, and out into space, invisible forces are guiding particles along curved paths and turning some of their energy into soft light near the poles. You remain in the calm interior of a building, but you are also inside a protective system built from air and magnetic fields, shaped by the same physical laws that guide motion everywhere between the sun and Earth. Far above the atmosphere, space is not entirely empty. From distant stars, exploding remnants, and energetic regions in the galaxy, high-energy particles travel outward in many directions. Some of these particles, often called cosmic rays, eventually arrive near Earth. When they meet the upper layers of the atmosphere, they collide with atoms there and create showers of secondary particles that continue downward, losing energy as they go. By the time any of these particles reach the ground, their strength has been reduced many times over. Around you, there is also a quieter, constant presence known as background radiation. Some of it comes from these cosmic rays that have passed through the atmosphere and other materials. Some comes from small amounts of naturally radioactive elements in rocks, soil, and building materials. Even the food you eat and your own body contain tiny amounts of such elements. Their atoms occasionally release energy in the form of particles or rays as they shift to more stable forms. The levels at which this happens are low and have been part of life on Earth for as long as life has existed. Scientists measure these influences with sensitive detectors that can register the faintest signals. By studying cosmic rays, they learn about violent events and processes far from our planet. By monitoring background radiation, they ensure that levels remain within known, safe ranges, and they can detect any unusual changes in the environment. In everyday life, you are not directly aware of these measurements, but they form part of the careful observation that surrounds modern life. You can think of this radiation as a very soft background hum, not a loud or pressing sound. Most of the energy from cosmic rays is absorbed high above you, in the thick layers of the atmosphere. Rock, soil, and building materials provide further shielding. What reaches you in your room is a small residue of vast processes that started far away in time and space. It does not surge suddenly or press on your senses. It remains at a steady level that has been present for generations. As you rest, these particles may pass through the room without any sign, leaving only the tiniest trace that can be detected with special instruments. They are part of the same physical world as gravity, air pressure, and light, but their presence in your daily experience is extremely subtle. Knowing this can place them in perspective. They are not a hidden, uncontrolled force, but a gentle, well-studied background, one more layer of invisible activity in a universe that is busy on many scales, even while the space around you feels calm and still. When we look at the forces shaping your room, everything feels well mapped. Gravity, electromagnetism, pressure, and molecular forces explain why objects stand, lights shine, and air fills your lungs. But when astronomers look outward at galaxies and the expansion of the universe, they find signs of influences that are not yet fully understood. These are known, for now, as dark matter and dark energy. They are not shadows or hidden substances in the everyday sense, but names for effects we can measure even though we cannot yet see the source directly. Dark matter first appeared as an idea when scientists studied how galaxies rotate. The stars in the outer regions orbit faster than they should if only the visible matter were present. To explain this, astronomers infer that there must be additional mass spread through and around galaxies, mass that exerts gravity but does not give off light. Whatever this dark matter is made of, it interacts very weakly with ordinary matter, except through gravity. Sensitive detectors are searching for its particles, and theories propose many possibilities, but so far its exact nature remains uncertain. Dark energy arises from another observation. The expansion of the universe is not slowing down under gravity, as once expected, but speeding up. To describe this acceleration, cosmologists introduce dark energy, a term for whatever is driving this large-scale behavior. It could be a property of space itself, or something else entirely. For now, it is a placeholder, a way of acknowledging that there is an influence we can measure but do not yet fully explain. These ideas may sound distant from your everyday experience, and in many ways they are. Dark matter and dark energy shape the motion of galaxies and the fate of cosmic expansion, not the behavior of chairs, walls, or air in your room. The laws that govern local forces, gravity near Earth, electromagnetism in circuits, molecular bonds in solids, are tested and confirmed in laboratories and in engineering structures. They do not depend on solving the mysteries of the wider universe. What dark matter and dark energy show is that even in a world where much is understood, some questions remain open. Science is not a finished book, but an ongoing process of comparing explanations with observations and changing ideas when the evidence demands it. For your immediate surroundings, this uncertainty at cosmic scales does not introduce chaos. The invisible forces that hold your environment together are among the best tested in all of physics. The unresolved influences act far away, on distances measured between galaxies, not between you and the floor. Knowing this, you can allow those cosmic mysteries to remain gently in the background, interesting to think about but not a source of worry, as you lie in a room governed by well-known, reliable laws. So far, we have spoken of gravity as a pull, an attraction between masses that keeps you on the bed and guides planets in their orbits. In everyday life, that picture works well. Modern physics, however, offers a deeper description. Instead of treating gravity as a separate force that reaches across empty space, it describes it as a property of space-time itself, the combined fabric of space and time curving in response to mass and energy. Objects then move along the straightest possible paths within that curved geometry. You can imagine an analogy to help picture this, even though it is not perfect. Think of a flexible sheet stretched tightly, like a smooth fabric pulled across a frame. If you place a heavy ball in the center, the sheet sags around it. Smaller balls placed nearby will roll toward the heavier one, not because it is pulling them directly, but because the surface on which they move is curved. Their natural straight-line paths have been bent by the shape of the sheet. In a similar way, a massive object like Earth curves space-time around it, and smaller objects follow paths determined by that curvature. In this view, what you feel as weight is your body resisting its natural free-fall path through curved space-time. If there were no surface beneath you, you would follow the path of least resistance toward Earth, accelerating as you fall. When the bed or floor stops you, it pushes upward, changing your motion away from that free-fall path. Your muscles and skeleton sense this push as pressure, and your nervous system interprets it as weight. When astronauts in orbit feel weightless, it is not because gravity has disappeared, but because they and their spacecraft are allowed to follow their free-fall paths without a surface pushing back. Light is also affected by curvature. Even though photons have no rest mass, their paths can be bent by regions where space-time is strongly curved. When light from distant stars passes near a very massive object, like a galaxy cluster, its path can deviate, creating effects such as gravitational lensing. Astronomers observe multiple images or distorted arcs of distant galaxies formed by this bending. These observations match the predictions of the curved space-time description and provide a way to test it on very large scales. Closer to home, this refined picture adjusts details of motion, precise measurements of planetary orbits, the behavior of clocks in different gravitational fields, and the paths of spacecraft all reveal small corrections beyond the simple pull model. Systems such as satellite navigation must account for these effects to maintain accuracy. Time itself passes slightly differently at different altitudes in a gravitational field, and engineers incorporate these differences into the design and operation of their systems. None of this changes the way gravity feels to you when you roll over or shift your weight on the bed. The curved space-time description does not remove the familiar experience. it places it in a wider framework. The sensation of being pressed into the mattress, the way dropped objects accelerate toward the floor, and the way Earth and Moon orbit one another are all part of the same geometric pattern. The old picture of a pull and the new picture of curvature describe the same events from different levels of depth. As you lie where you are, you can think of yourself as resting on the surface of a massive planet that gently shapes the space-time around it. You do not see the curvature. You only feel its consequence as a steady downward tendency met by the upward support of the bed and the building. Whether you choose to imagine gravity as a pull or as a curve, the effect on your body and your surroundings remains the same, reliable and continuous, quietly guiding motion in ways that you can trust without needing to calculate them. From the small space where you are lying, it can be hard to picture just how large the world around you is. Yet you are resting on the surface of a planet that is not only solid and heavy, but also shaping the structure of space-time around it. Earth curves the geometry in its neighborhood, guiding the paths of falling objects, flowing rivers, orbiting satellites, and even beams of light that pass close by. You do not see that curvature directly. You feel it only as a constant sense of down, as the weight of your body being held against the bed. You can imagine Earth as a quiet traveler around the sun, carrying you with it. The same curvature that keeps you on the surface also shapes the broad path of the planet in its orbit, bending what would otherwise be a straight line into a gentle loop that repeats year after year. Farther out, other planets follow their own curved paths. Stars circle the center of the galaxy. On every scale, motion responds to the shape of space-time created by mass and energy. The rules are the same whether you are thinking about a dropped object in your room or a star moving slowly in a distant spiral arm. Closer to home, the ground beneath your building has been shaped by long processes of pressure and flow, guided by gravity. Layers of rock formed under ancient seas, folded by tectonic motion and worn down by erosion, now support foundations, streets, and soil. On top of that, human structures add their own order. Beams, columns, and walls distributing loads so that forces move into the ground safely. All of this sits within the curved space-time around Earth, forming a nested arrangement of support, from your mattress to the planet's interior. Above you, the atmosphere wraps Earth in a layered shell. It follows the same curvature, clinging to the planet under gravity. Air molecules move in patterns that create weather, wind, and sound. Yet the overall shape is that of a thin, protective coat, bound to the world by the same invisible rule that keeps you from drifting away. Higher still, Earth's magnetic field arches outward, deflecting particles from the sun and guiding some of them toward the polar skies. The geometry of space-time, the pull of gravity, and the shape of magnetic fields all work together to create a stable environment in which the surface remains hospitable. When scientists study these structures, they use equations and measurements, comparing predictions to observations. When you experience them, you feel only the result. A sense of being held in place, of having a reliable down, and of living in a world where objects fall, roll, and rest in ways you can anticipate. The great arcs of planetary motion and the quiet stability of your room are different expressions of the same underlying order. If sleep begins to approach as you think about this, you can let it come. You do not need to follow every detail or imagine every orbit. It is enough to know that you are lying in a small, protected space inside a larger structure that is calm on human timescales. Earth will continue its path around the sun. The ground will continue to support the building. Gravity will continue to curve space-time and hold you gently against the bed. If sleep has not yet arrived, that is completely fine. You can simply feel the contact between your body and the surface beneath you. Notice the quiet weight that tells you gravity is still acting, and allow your breathing to settle. The vast structure of the universe, with its curves and motions, will continue on its own. Your part, in this moment, is only to rest within it, supported by forces that have been in place long before you closed your eyes and will remain long after you have drifted into sleep. Near you, perhaps on a table or beside the bed, there may be a phone, a tablet, a watch, or another small device. From the outside, it looks like a single, solid object with a smooth surface and a few buttons or a touch screen. Inside, however, it is a landscape of invisible forces at work. Tiny components guide electrons along carefully designed paths. Sensors transform light, motion, pressure, or magnetic fields into electrical signals. All of this happens at scales too small to see, yet it shapes how the device responds to your touch. At the heart of many devices is a microchip, or integrated circuit. A chip contains millions or even billions of transistors, which are tiny electronic switches. Each transistor can be in a state that either allows current to pass or blocks it, depending on the voltage applied to certain connections. These on and off states can represent the ones and zeros of digital information. When many transistors work together in patterns, they can store data, perform calculations, and coordinate actions. The forces that control them are electric fields inside very thin layers of material, nudging electrons into or out of narrow channels. Semiconductor materials, such as silicon, are carefully modified so that they can conduct electricity in specific ways. By adding small amounts of other elements, engineers create regions that favor positive or negative carriers. Where these regions meet, electric fields form naturally. By applying voltages to tiny contacts, circuits can steer charges and control where currents flow. It is a quiet choreography of forces, fields shaping motion, motion changing signals, and signals triggering further changes in fields. Sensors extend this choreography to the outside world. A light sensor changes its electrical behavior when photons strike it, producing a current that depends on brightness. A motion sensor uses tiny masses and springs etched into a chip. When the device moves, inertia shifts the mass, and the resulting change in capacitance or resistance becomes an electrical signal. Magnetic sensors respond to nearby fields, allowing devices to detect orientation or the presence of magnets. In each case, a physical quantity, light, acceleration, field strength, is converted into a change in electric forces that circuits can read and interpret. Displays reverse the direction of this process. In a screen, electric fields control how tiny elements emit or block light. In some technologies, voltages twist molecules so that they either allow polarized light through or block it. In others, currents drive small light-emitting components that shine when energized. When you see an image appear, you are looking at the result of many small regions responding to electric commands, each controlled by microscopic structures. Storage devices also rely on invisible forces. Data can be kept as small patches of magnetization on a disk, where magnetic fields encode bits that can later be read by a sensor. In solid-state storage, bits are stored as charges trapped in tiny regions of material. Electric fields hold these charges in place until a deliberate action changes them. Over time, these technologies allow vast amounts of information to be kept, moved, and recalled through the calm guidance of electromagnetic forces at very small scales. As you rest near one of these devices, it may be active or it may be idle. When it is quiet, currents shrink to a minimum, fields remain steady, and only a few internal clocks and memories continue to operate. When it wakes, fields rise and fall in intricate patterns, and charges move along paths that engineers designed with great precision. You see only the smooth response on the surface, a screen that lights up, a sound that plays, or a message that appears. Beneath that, countless small interactions unfold according to predictable laws, another layer of invisible order at work in the world around you. As the day moves further into night, many of the devices around you begin to change their behavior. Screens dim or switch off, notifications slow or stop. Some equipment is shut down entirely, while others slip into standby modes that draw only small amounts of power. Inside them, currents that were once busy guiding images, sounds, and connections become quieter. Electric fields that switched rapidly now change more slowly, maintaining only clocks, memory states, or simple listening functions. The invisible forces do not vanish, they settle into simpler, lower activity patterns. In the wiring of the building, the overall load often decreases as people turn off lights and appliances. The same voltage is available, the same ability to drive currents through circuits, but fewer paths are active. Breakers and safety systems remain in place, unchanged, ready to respond if needed. Power stations feeding the grid adjust their output over time, matching generation to demand. The large-scale system of fields, currents, and rotating machinery that keeps electricity available around the clock continues to operate, but at night it often does so with a little more reserve. Within a device that is resting, components are still arranged and ready. Transistors hold their states, preserving data. Sensors may idle, prepared to wake when a button is pressed or a signal arrives. Small regulators keep voltages within narrow ranges. This quiet readiness is itself a form of order. The electromagnetic forces remain carefully controlled, confined to specific paths, even when very little is happening. The hardware does not need to be active at full capacity to remain stable. Your nervous system can mirror this shift. During a busy day, many circuits in the brain are engaged with tasks, decisions, and responses to stimuli. As the environment becomes darker and quieter, fewer demands are placed on these systems. Signals related to external events decline. Hormonal changes support the onset of rest, and parts of the brain that encourage alertness begin to release their influence. There is no single switch, only a gradual rebalancing of activity and forces within the nervous system. If you choose, you can support this process by reducing stimulation around you. A screen turned off no longer sends bright pulses of light into your eyes. A device silenced stops generating sudden sounds that call for attention. The electromagnetic patterns inside those devices become simpler, and so do the patterns of electrical activity in your own brain as fewer interruptions arrive. This does not guarantee that sleep will come at once, but it creates conditions that allow internal rhythms to move more easily toward rest. If you notice that you are still awake, that is completely fine. Sleep often arrives in its own time, not exactly when you expect. What you can rely on is that the physical world around you remains stable while you wait. The power grid continues to function. Devices remain safely in low activity states. The bed continues to support you. The invisible forces that keep structures intact and circuits ready do not require your attention. You can let thoughts come and go more slowly, knowing that both technology and your own body are allowed to run at a quieter setting for the night. When you look around the room in your mind, it may seem as though many separate things are happening. Your body resting on a bed, air filling your lungs, light touching your eyes, devices waiting nearby, the building standing quietly on its foundations. Yet all of these scenes are woven together by the same small set of invisible forces. Gravity, electromagnetism, pressure, and the forces that bind atoms and nuclei are not competing influences. They cooperate, each taking a different role in shaping the same environment. Gravity provides the broad framework. It holds Earth together, keeps the atmosphere attached to the planet, and presses your body into contact with the surface beneath you. Without it, air would drift away, water would not pool in oceans, and the ground would not feel like a stable base. Electromagnetism fills in finer details. It governs the behavior of electrons in atoms, creates chemical bonds, guides currents in circuits, and generates light. The firmness of a wall, the glow of a lamp, and the quiet readiness of electronic devices are all expressions of electromagnetic rules at different scales. Air pressure and fluid forces operate within this framework, responding to gravity and temperature to shape weather, breathing, and sound. They make the atmosphere behave like a soft, responsive cushion, transmitting pressure, carrying oxygen, and smoothing temperature differences. Molecular forces and surface tensions work at even smaller scales, deciding whether a material is stiff or flexible, whether a droplet holds together or spreads, whether fabrics feel smooth or coarse. Deep inside atoms, nuclear forces bind protons and neutrons in their tiny cores, allowing atoms to exist at all. These forces do not change from moment to moment in your room, but their stability underlies everything else. They make it possible for elements to persist, for matter to retain its identity as time passes. When you combine this with the bonds between atoms and the patterns of electrons, you get the familiar materials that surround you. Seen together, these forces create a layered structure. At the largest scale, Gravity and space-time curvature organize planets and orbits. At the human scale, gravity, air pressure, and material strength shape buildings, rooms, and bodies. At the microscopic scale, electromagnetic and molecular forces arrange atoms and molecules into solids, liquids, and gases. At the deepest scale, nuclear forces hold atomic nuclei intact. Wherever you focus, the same few influences appear again and again, providing continuity between the vast and the close, the visible and the invisible. As you lie within this structure, every ordinary object becomes a sign of their cooperation. A glass of water held together by cohesion, standing on a table supported by structural strength, in a room anchored by gravity and protected by an atmosphere, on a planet moving through curved space-time. Nothing in this picture is random in its basic behavior. The superficial events of daily life may be unpredictable, but the physical framework beneath them is steady. Knowing this, you can see your surroundings not as a collection of isolated facts, but as a connected whole held together by a small set of quiet, reliable forces. Many worries about the unseen begin where understanding ends. When you know that something is there but do not know what it is or how it behaves, your mind can easily fill the gap with guesses. Invisible forces then feel like mysteries that might change suddenly or act without pattern. One of the quiet roles of science is to replace this uncertainty with tested explanations and measurements, turning vague concerns into clear, limited facts that fit within a larger picture. Consider the structure of a building. Engineers do not simply hope that floors will hold. They calculate how much weight beams and columns can bear, how materials respond to forces, and how wind and other loads will press on walls and frames. These calculations are based on experiments and physical laws that have been confirmed many times. When the building is complete, it is not a guess that keeps it standing over your head. It is the same gravity, material strength, and pressure behavior we have been describing, applied deliberately and checked. Electrical systems follow similar rules. Instead of wondering whether currents might randomly surge through walls, designers use strict standards for voltage, current, and insulation. Devices are tested to ensure that under normal conditions they stay within safe limits. Regulations define how strong radio and wireless signals may be, how much heat a component can produce, and how circuits must respond to faults. When you see a light turn on or a device connect, there is a great deal of quiet preparation behind that simple act. Even natural phenomena are made less threatening when their patterns are known. Weather forecasts use data about pressure, temperature, and wind to anticipate storms and changes in temperature. Seismology maps fault lines and measures the way waves travel through rock, giving insight into how the ground behaves. Astronomy tracks the paths of objects in space, predicting eclipses, transits, and the movements of planets centuries in advance. The invisible forces involved do not become weaker because they are understood, but they become less mysterious, which often makes them feel less alarming. There are still open questions, especially at the largest scales of the universe or in the smallest details of fundamental particles. Yet these unanswered parts sit on top of a foundation that is very solid for everyday life. The physics that explains why your bed holds, why air behaves as it does, and why circuits function is among the most thoroughly tested knowledge humans have. Experiments repeat, measurements agree, and practical applications work as expected, day after day. Knowledge does not require you to think about equations while you rest. Its calming effect comes from knowing that others have examined these forces closely and found that they behave in consistent ways. The room you are in was built, wired, and furnished using that consistency. The invisible forces around you are not shifting whims. They are regular, measured patterns that have been guiding matter for a very long time. As you lie there, you do not need to solve or verify any of this. You can let the details fade and hold on to a simpler idea. The unseen influences in your immediate world are known, bounded, and structured. Gravity, pressure, light, and fields are not waiting to surprise you with new behavior in the middle of the night. They will continue to do what they have always done, providing a stable background against which your thoughts can slow, your muscles can loosen, and your mind can rest more easily. The room around you feels still, but the ground beneath it is part of a planet that is always changing, slowly and with great patience. Deep below the surface, rock is under enormous pressure and temperature. Over long timescales, it can flow, bend, and break. Tectonic plates, large pieces of Earth's outer shell, drift a few centimeters each year, carrying continents and oceans with them. The forces that move them are invisible in the moment, but over millions of years they raise mountains, open basins, and reshape coastlines. You can picture two plates pressing into one another. Neither can easily slide past, so rock crumples and folds. Layers that were once horizontal are tilted and pushed upward, forming ridges and peaks. Elsewhere, plates pull apart, and molten material rises to fill the gap, creating new crust on the ocean floor. In some regions, one plate sinks beneath another, carrying rock deep into the mantle, where it may eventually melt and rejoin the slow circulation of material inside Earth. Glaciers, though smaller than plates, also respond to subtle forces over long periods. Thick layers of ice can flow downhill under their own weight, even though the motion is too slow to notice in a single day. Over centuries, a glacier carves valleys, smooths rock surfaces, and deposits sediments far from their origins. When climate conditions change, ice retreats, leaving behind lakes, moraines, and polished stone. The landscape you see in many places is the accumulated result of these gradual movements. Water, guided by gravity and shaped by the resistance of rock and soil, plays its own patient role. Rivers cut channels into the land, grain by grain carrying material toward the sea. Waves and tides break against cliffs and beaches, wearing them down and redistributing sand along the shore. Each individual wave is small, but over thousands of years, coastlines shift noticeably. The same gravitational pull that gives you weight also drives these flows, pulling water downhill wherever it can find a path. Even the ground directly beneath your building has a history shaped by slow forces. Sediments may have been laid down in ancient lakes or seas, compressed into rock, lifted, and then weathered. Human construction adds another layer. Foundations designed to spread the load of walls and floors, materials chosen to withstand pressure and weather. The structure that feels so permanent to you is a temporary arrangement in a much longer story of motion and change. From your point of view, these processes are almost completely silent. You do not feel tectonic plates drifting or cliffs wearing away grain by grain. On human timescales, mountains, valleys, and coastlines appear fixed. Only rare events, like earthquakes or major storms, reveal the power stored in these slow movements. Most of the time, the forces act gently, accumulating effects over intervals far longer than a human life. Thinking about these slow forces can change how you see the stability of your surroundings. The planet is not frozen, but its changes are usually so gradual that, within a single lifetime, the ground is effectively steady. The room where you rest, the streets outside, and the familiar shapes of nearby hills or buildings are all supported by this long-term balance. Gravity, internal heat, and the strength of materials interact in ways that allow structures to stand and surfaces to remain workable for generations. As you lie still, you are part of this layered timeline. The invisible forces that shape continents, carve valleys, and shift coastlines also act on the rock beneath your city, the soil under your building, and the materials that hold up your bed. On the scale of minutes and hours, they provide a steady foundation. You can let your attention narrow back to the feeling of support under your body, knowing that the same patient forces that reshape landscapes over ages are, in this moment, keeping the ground beneath you firm and unmoving while you rest. You are lying in a small, familiar space, but you are surrounded by an entire world of invisible order. Gravity holds your body gently against the bed, sending your weight into the frame, through the floor, and into the ground beneath the building. The atmosphere presses softly on your skin, while matching pressures inside your body keep everything in balance. Friction between fabrics and surfaces keeps pillows, blankets, and furniture in place, so that the room remains quietly arranged around you. Inside the walls, electric fields and currents follow their paths with calm precision. Even if devices are sleeping, their circuits still rest in orderly states, ready to wake without confusion. Magnets in motors, speakers, and storage media continue to hold their patterns. Above you, the atmosphere, magnetic field, and curved space-time around Earth carry on their work, guiding winds, deflecting particles from the sun, and steering satellites along predictable orbits. All of this happens without asking anything from you in this moment. Matter itself remains stable through forces even deeper than these. Bonds between atoms hold the structure of the bedframe, the walls, and the floor. Intermolecular forces keep materials solid, liquids flowing, and air behaving as a gentle gas. Nuclear forces inside atomic nuclei maintain the identity of the elements that make up your body and everything around you. These forces do not flicker on and off. They are steady aspects of how reality is built, continuing their quiet work whether or not anyone is watching. When you think about invisible forces in this way, they become less like unknown threats and more like the framework of a house that you rarely see but rely on completely. The pull you feel as weight, the air you draw with each breath, the light that reaches your eyes or filters through your eyelids, even the signals that cross the room to connect devices, all fit into a consistent pattern. The same small family of forces shapes events from the scale of atoms to the scale of galaxies, and your room is simply one calm point in that larger arrangement. If sleep has not yet come, there is nothing wrong. You are already doing the main part, which is simply lying here while your body and nervous system shift gradually toward a quieter state. You do not need to solve any mysteries of physics or remember every detail. The forces we have talked about will continue to act in the same way whether your mind is fully alert or drifting at the edges of dreams. Gravity will still hold you. The atmosphere will still protect you. Materials will still remain solid. Circuits, if they are on, will still follow their patterns without your supervision. If you like, you can bring your attention back to a few simple sensations. Notice the contact between your body and the surface beneath you, the steady pull downward, and the equal support pushing back upward. Feel the air moving slowly in and out of your lungs, pressure adjusting with each breath. Sense the quiet around you, the stillness of objects held by friction and structure. Each of these is a small, direct sign that the invisible forces around you are doing exactly what they are expected to do. You are resting inside a web of order that stretches far beyond the walls, yet in this moment it is working entirely in your favor, giving you a stable place to lie still and let go of the day. Whether sleep arrives in the next minute or later on, the world of invisible forces will remain steady underneath you, above you, and within you. We from Sleepy Stories wish you a good night.